So your most recent trip was Africa, all 54, 58 African countries,
54.
54, and over 5 years.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that. I know you were going to climb all the highest peaks in these countries, and that's so there's sort of like a framework, a quest, and you were driving around. But tell us a little bit about this the nature of the trip.
Yeah. So I wanted to spend 3 years in Africa, but there's there's so many logistical challenges getting visas, and when you have a car that wasn't very cooperative, sometimes the car would break down and it would require months of work on it, things like that. Just and also because I was just enjoying myself, I wasn't in a big hurry. So all that made it so that my 3 year trip turned out to be a 5 year trip. And yeah, I was just going overland. I never left the continent during that whole time, that whole 5 year period. I would find out what's the tallest mountain of each country and then try to go climb it. And I managed to do it for 50 out of the 54 countries.
And the other ones maybe were like in the middle of the Sahara or something, and you couldn't really get there. Or how come you didn't climb those four?
None of them were in the middle of the Sahara. I climbed all the ones that were in, like the really, really tough ones is Emikusi, which is in the Chad, which is the tallest mountain in the entire Sahara Desert, and that's hard to get to. And I nearly lost my wife and my brother-in-law. They both nearly died on that mountain. And then the other one that was quite hard was the tallest mountain of Libya, which is on the Chad border, which is also smack in the middle of the Sahara, very isolated. But the four ones I did not get to do, one of them, both of them were associated with Eritrea. So Eritrea's mountain itself, as well as the tallest mountain of Djibouti, which is they share a border. On the border, on the summit of the tallest mountain of Djibouti, is also a border with. If you're standing on top of the summit, you can have one foot in Ethiopia, another foot in Eritrea, and if you have a third foot, you could put it in Djibouti.
Oh, that's such a good bang for your buck there.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not the tallest mountain of all those countries. It's only the tallest mountain of Djibouti.
Okay.
So Ethiopia has its own tallest mountain, and Eritrea has its own taller mountain. But there was a couple of bang for your bucks like that. There was a couple of places in Africa where you're on the tallest mountain of two countries at once. So that only happened, I think, 2 or 3 times. Anyway, so Djibouti, Eritrea, Sudan, and Tunisia. Those are the four countries. And they're all for military reasons. They all have insurrections or problems or fighting or this kind of stuff that inhibited my ability to go there.
Okay, I definitely want to ask. I definitely want to ask about your impressions of Africa. But first, we got to hear the story about almost losing your wife and brother-in-law. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, it was crazy. So the tallest mountain of Chad is called Emikusi, and it's about 3,800 meters, which is, I'm going to guess something like 14,000 feet or something like that, maybe 15,000 feet. Anyway, it's a tall mountain. And it's an extinct volcano, if I remember correctly. But regardless, we went there and we had talked to the local villagers at the bottom, and they had indicated to me that there is water up near the summit. Like, you can basically, let's say 80% of your journey to the mountain is there's no water, but there's somewhere along the way that you'll get water.
Okay.
So we kind of budgeted our water needs, assuming that we were going to find water on our way to the summit. And we didn't find it. And there was one point where Mustafa is my brother-in-law, and we saw like a canyon, and there was a lot of vegetation down at the bottom of the canyon, kind of green, lush vegetation, relatively lush. But it was a good walk downhill. And I told Rejoice is the name of my wife, I told her, continue walking, just take a small bottle of water with you and continue walking, and we'll meet you near the base of the summit, like before the final climb up the mountain. And I pointed out where she was supposed to go. Mm-hmm. And I thought we had communicated well where more or less we would be. And there was nobody there, and there's no vegetation. So when you yell and scream, your voice travels very far. So we should be able to figure each other out. We went down, Mustafa and I, and there was no water. Now, to make a long story longer, and we got there, and there was no Rejoice. In other words, we got to the place that we thought was more or less the meeting point. I was yelling out her name. She wasn't there. I went to the top of the mountain. She wasn't there. And so right before I went to the top of the mountain, Mustafa literally collapsed on the ground. He just, I mean, not in a kind of semi-dramatic fashion. He just said, I can't go anymore. I'm so tired. I'm so thirsty. I can't do it anymore. I'm hot. I'm whatever. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take your GPS coordinates right now. So I took out my smartphone. I pinged I bookmarked his
Yes.
location. I took the waypoint. And I said, stay here. Do not fucking move. I will be back here in about half an hour or so. Don't move. I go up the mountain to the summit. I come back. He's not fucking there. Like,
saw that coming.
And so I'm yelling out his name, Mustafa, Mustafa. And later on, Rejoice would tell me that she heard me calling his name. And then he heard his response to me. I didn't hear it. So she knew at that time, I guess she heard us crying for each other, and she knew that we had separated. And that's when she started to cry, because she knows that her brother has no experience in the mountains. He'd never been up in the mountains, really. And so he would be in deep shit. So I hiked back to the campsite where we had the water, the sleeping bags and stuff like that. And lo and behold, Mustafa was not there, nor was Rejoice. And it was sunset. So I put out a light beacon to like blink the light to try to like attract them if they walk in the night. No go. I was shivering, Derek, with not one, but 2 sleeping bags. I was wearing both sleeping bags because nobody was there. I had 3 sleeping bags. I was wearing both of them, 2 of them, and I was still cold. To give you an idea how cold, and they were at a higher altitude because they got lost higher up. Next day, finally, I find Mustafa about 2 hours of searching, and then about an hour after that, I found Rejoice. Thank God, because we were out of water, and the temperature it's shivering at night, very cold at that altitude in the desert, but it gets very hot during the day.
Yes.
And so I had to go up and down. I'd be going up and down these ravines, up and down ravines in the desert, getting baked, and I had no water. I was like, and I had to walk some 20 kilometers or more to go back and I had pressed an SOS beacon, but I know there's no way to get any rescue. There's no helicopter in sight. Nothing. So, bad situation.
Wow. Were you able to sleep? Like, did you?
I did. Yeah, I did sleep. I was exhausted. I was very nervous. When I was going into bed, I had an SOS beacon, so it communicates with satellite. But I knew it was fruitless. I was like, what can they do? I mean, because Chad is as big as the east coast of the United States. They have probably just one helicopter sitting in the capital. And it's like taking an helicopter from Georgia and then flying it all the way up to New York City. It's just too far of a distance. It's not going to make it. So, and there's no airstrip. There's nothing. And even if there were, how are they going to get here in time? People are going to die of exposure in probably 24 hours or maybe 48 hours max. So I just, I was like, and I was out of water. There's only so much I could do as a searcher.
Yeah.
So at some point I would have to throw in the towel and walk back down the mountain, get more water, grab a bunch of villagers and say, hey, villagers, come up with me and help me look for maybe a dead body or something like that. Maybe somebody, sitting in a cave who's just doesn't have the strength to get out of the cave, either my wife or my brother-in-law. It was fucked up.
Did you expect that they would find their way to the bottom of the mountain in the night?
I thought maybe. Oh no! Here's a really funny story, and just shows you how little experience poor Mustafa had about the mountains. Believe it or not, he actually found water up there when he got separated from me. Yeah. He actually found the water, and guess what this fuckhead did? He drank and then left in the middle of the night to keep walking around, looking around for me. And then when the morning came, he didn't know where the water was anymore. He went back to look for it, and he's like, I had no idea where the water was. I'm like, Mustafa, when you found the water, why didn't you just stop right there in the middle of the night and just sleep next to the water, fill up your can, and then leave in the morning? And not only that, but he was afraid of animals. What animals are there in the desert? Maybe an antelope. Nobody's going to eat you. But he slept in the open, exposed to the wind and the cold, as opposed to Rejoice, who was a bit smarter and more experienced because she had gone to about 25 mountains with me. And so she knew to go in a cave of some sort, seek shelter amongst a jumble of rocks to kind of cut out the wind. But anyway, my poor brother-in-law was completely clueless. I don't blame him. He grew up in the desert. He grew up in the Sahara Desert, and so he's never seen a mountain like that in his life. And he was young. He was like 21 years old. So,
What's your relationship with your brother-in-law right now?
oh, it's great. We talk to each other every day. No, he's nobody's mad at me, but I would have been forever guilty if one or both of them had died there, because it was me who kind of had the bright idea of going to this mountain, and it's just we got in over our heads. And ironically, it was not ironically, but the next week we were going to an even harder mountain, which is the tallest mountain of Libya, and that was going to be much harder in many respects. But in some ways, having undergone through that ordeal and near-death experience, we were able to do the tallest mountain of Libya without a hitch. And so it took us a week to drive there, about 3 days to hike there, with no water. We dropped water caches along the entire way. There was not a drop of water in the whole way. And we made it. We picked up the water on the way back. We GPSed each water location on the way back. We did it. But I think it's because that was such a humbling experience, and especially for Mustafa, that when I told the motherfucker, "Don't leave me," this time he listened. Don't get out of my sight. And when I tell you to stay put, you stay fucking put.